I missed Emergency when it debuted at Sundance earlier this year, but now it's coming to Amazon Prime. Is this comedy with a social message worth the time? Ready for a night of legendary partying, three college students must weigh the pros and cons of calling the police when faced with an unexpected situation. This stars RJ Seiler, Donald Elise Watkins, and Sebastian Chacon. Now, Seiler and Watkins are best friends who are planning to go on a massive party tour. It's kind of like The World's End, where Simon Pegg and his buddies are hitting all of the pubs in one town in one night. Well, the same goes here. Seiler and Watkins are Sean and Kunle, respectively, and they're going to hit up all of the major parties happening on their campus in one wild night. As they get home to get ready to go out, they find a white girl on their living room floor of their house, and this is where we begin with some serious story tension. The two young men know the right thing to do is either to call the cops or an ambulance, but they also know the reality of how things could play out. They're two young black men with a white girl laying on the floor. And we, as the audience, know that they're completely innocent. But we also know that they'll most likely not how they will be viewed if they indeed call the authorities. This story then plays with a ton of mishaps as the young men try to figure out the best way to get this girl out of their house to someplace safe, all while not getting into trouble. This begins to be a bit like If You Give a Mouse a Cookie combined with Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Now, the first half of this movie is filled with some pretty funny but pointed comedy. We first see Sean and Kunle in one of their classes, and it is a pretty shocking intro. Now, Sean's reaction to something that was being discussed was subtle, and it's in the background of the shot, but I found it hilarious because of its realness. I love the dynamic between Sean and Kunle. While they're best friends, Kunle is also struggling with familial expectations and then even pressures, which then has the potential to bleed over into his relationship with Sean. And the movie does a great job of taking us on this series of unfortunate events as the guys just try to figure out how to get the girl out of their house and to someplace safe. Now, along the way, there are several areas that are filled with social commentary. Now, they're overt, so they're not hard to miss, but that doesn't take away from their pointed effectiveness. As a small example, the guys are trying to figure out their next move, and they're parked on a street, but it's in front of a house. Now, the interactions aren't surprising, but they are ironic given what other visuals are present at this house. They're parked outside a white family's home who is nervous about young black men outside. But here's the thing. The family has a Black Lives Matter sign in their yard. I mean, like I said, it's pointed and it's overt. Now, through all the mishaps, I think some of the progression is a bit predictable. Now, sometimes the humor feels more forced as well, but both of these, they just don't happen too often, nor are they large enough to cause distractions or break the storytelling. Now, there are also a lot of terrible decisions that the characters make, which then allows for a bunch of plot conveniences. Now, while these are prevalent, they still don't cause the story to become unenjoyable. I think what will have the largest potential for turning off an audience from this is just the very abrupt change in storytelling that we get in the final act of the film. Now, the message has always been present. Throughout the entire film, there has been this building social commentary on the disparity of how races are treated, especially with black men. So this film sticks with this theme very effectively. It's the execution and tonal shift that's going to be jarring. I mean, we go from semi-lighthearted with bumblings, mishaps, and misunderstandings to an emotional and scary sequence that is terrifying and unjust, but it's also very real. The comedy at this point ends, full stop. What plays out on screen then is an emotional drama with some very palpable acting from Watkins. I loved the commentary contained within this, but there's a level of trauma displayed here that is very unsettling and still really necessary to watch and understand. The story does then begin to provide some resolution, but I appreciate how the conclusion of the film doesn't dismiss the previous actions. It doesn't write them off as being one and done type of thing that has no lasting effect. We see, and I even felt, the ramifications of the story's climax. I also appreciate the commentary on the antagonist. Too often we've seen people make these rote and half-hearted apologies for their actions, never really taking responsibility, but instead just rattling off a list of excuses. And too often we see the victims of that just having to suck it up and then take the lame attempts at atonement. But here, that's not necessarily the case. The victims don't have to assuage the antagonist's feelings, and that is a powerful commentary in itself. Now, this is a relatively quick watch at 1 hour and 45 minutes. The whole thing moves along with good efficiency, and there is an urgency that is felt from multiple angles. I mean, not only do our main characters want to get the girl out of their care for just their own well-being, but they also don't want to miss any of the parties. Each setback they encounter affects both of their goals, increasing their frustration, but also adding good tension between the characters. And this is also made more convincing because Kunle is a caring person. I mean, he genuinely wants to ensure the girl is safe. If he was more interested in selfish pursuits, he'd just dump her on the side of the road and be on his way to the party circuit. And I like the personal tension and conflict that this causes within Kudley, which then makes the climax even more hard hitting. So overall, Emergency is a pointed social commentary with a comedic wrapper. The comedy of errors our protagonists endures works to add frustration, tension, humor, and urgency. The examination of friendship and priorities is effective in creating characters with depth, as the story looks at both the horrors of reality and the chase of escapism. The commentary on the faulty and dangerous assumptions the young men face as a result of their race, it is biting and very relevant, making this a poignant story for today. Now, the tonal shift is abrupt, but necessary as a story device to make us sit up and take notice. While it's different, it's also effective. There's no sex or nudity, a ton of profanity, and some violence. I give Emergency 4 out of 5 couches. So what's a comedy with a message that you've seen recently? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching.